I'm so excited that you took the time to join us on the next episode of Beyond the Culture. This is the show where we embrace change and challenge cultural norms and ideals. I'm your host, Dr. David Walker. So Josh, how you doing today?
Oh man, I'm doing good, Dr. Walker. Doing good, man. It's a wonderful time of the year right now. I'm in South Florida, and as you know, in the Sunshine State, it's always sunny 95% of the time. May have some rain, but either way, things are going great today.
Absolutely, and I am just super excited to have you on the show today. But let me give you your official introduction.
Okay, awesome. Yes.
So today on our show, we have Dr. Joshua Fredenburg. Dr. Josh is a learning and development consultant. He is a leadership speaker. Dr. Josh is a well sought after, dynamic, live, and virtual keynote speaker. Dr. Josh is the president and founder of Circle of Change Leadership Conference. He is the author of 7 books, and his latest book is entitled R.E.D. Leadership, 15 Ways to Retain, Engage, and Develop More Culturally Diverse Leaders. And I am super excited today to have on our show, Beyond the Culture, Dr. Joshua Fredenburg. Dr. Josh, welcome to the show.
Man, so good to be here again, Dr. Walker. Thank you so much for having me, being patient with me to get everything set up. And so we're ready to take off. Let's go.
Yeah. And so we have been looking forward to this opportunity just to have a conversation with you about you and your career and your experience in public speaking. And I want to start the conversation with this question. You have impacted those that you speak to, each, all of the the tours you've been on. You're a professional speaker, and you've impacted so many people. And I want to ask you this question: Did you ever envision that you would have the kind of impact that you're having today?
Well, when I originally set out on my journey as a young 6-year-old child, my goal was really to be an NBA basketball player. So ultimately, my entire life was dedicated to basketball, was dedicated to becoming a professional athlete, as well as a sports broadcaster. Not till I was 19 years of age, where everything shifted, and actually shifted because I tried out for the basketball team and was unable to make it because of one person. And so at that moment, as I often share, literally my entire career just shattered. My entire dream, vision, what I wanted to do came to a halt. And I was in this position of trying to figure out what is it that I was going to do. And it was at that moment where I often say God put me in the right position and put me around the right people to begin to reveal to me what was inside of me. So begin to identify my gifts and my passion and what I would do for free and, what brings joy to my life. And in that process, I decided that I wanted to be a national speaker that impact lives. And ultimately, that's when I really sought out to really just travel across the world and really just inspire, empower, and help people really to reach their fullest potential. That's where everything began to start, but didn't happen until I was 19 years of age because my mind was set that I was going to be a national basketball player. But since that moment and since that failure and since that challenge, the entire trajectory of my life changed. And from there, the vision's been pretty clear. But obviously, as I've learned in life, it expands, it grows, it evolves. And you begin to learn more that's inside of you than you may have initially thought from the jump.
So was there anyone that you saw that was a public speaker that you said, okay, I want to do what that person's doing? And who would that person be?
Yeah, I think the most impactful motivational speakers for me was obviously Anthony Robbins, Les Brown. Those are some of the more people that I was able to see on television that I actually saw speaking. But I would also say my pastor. I think Bishop Clarence E. McClendon at that moment, they had a huge following in Los Angeles, California. So before all the things happened or Whatever the case may be, there's so many different mixed rumors about that. But either way, I was there when it was packed. I was there when he was just speaking five times on a Sunday. And it was amazing. To be quite honest, I learned an awful lot about public speaking. I learned an awful lot about just understanding the professionalism of speaking. Although he was a preacher, I felt that he did a really good job at really setting a standard of what I call of what it means to be a speaker, how you carry yourself, your mannerisms, how you introduce, how you welcome, all that sort of stuff I was able to learn from him, which was really beneficial for me, as well as I was a communication major in college. And so at that time, I believe it was like 8th ranked in the nation, they said, of speech communication departments. And so I was able to learn a lot about public speaking from that as well. And so when you intertwine an incredible orator as far as Bishop Clarence Clinton is concerned, you have Les Brown and Anthony Robbins, and then you're actually majoring in it. And then I was speaking in college as well. So all that intertwined really helped me an awful lot.
I had no idea that you were a member of Bishop Clarence Church.
Yep. Church of the Harvest.
Yeah.
Harvest International. The Cosmopolitan Center now. Yep. I've been on the whole journey.
Yeah, he's a great speaker, as you said, great orator, great pastor. Bishop Clarence McClendon, watched him on TV all the time. So were you all, did you grow up in that church?
Yeah, honestly, I grew up in the Bay Area. When I was 19 years of age, I share this story often. I had the opportunity to go to a video shoot. It was the Brat. I forgot who else it was, and Jermaine Dupri. Okay. And so I'm here, and there's this young lady that really catches my attention. She has a sparkle in her eye. I ultimately make my way over there to start talking to her. Come to find out, her mother came. What? And so we're having a conversation. Her mother is like, you should go to this church. It's on La Brea and Adams. I think you would really like it a lot. And so I decided that Sunday I was going to go. And from that first moment that I stepped foot in the church, 21 years later, every time I'm in Southern California, continue to learn, to grow, and just been very blessed by Bishop Clarence. But I mean, extremely blessed. I wouldn't be where I am today if it wasn't for his ministry and wasn't for his just example as a leader. I'm very clear about that. I mean, I've really learned a lot, and it's had an impact not only on me spiritually, but also in the things that I do as well. So I feel very privileged and blessed that I accidentally wound up in Church of the Harvest at the age of 19. And so fast forward 20 plus years and still been learning and growing from his teachings.
That's awesome. That's awesome. When I was introducing you several times, I used the word leadership. Now, you've been a professional speaker, but leadership seems to be your focus. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Why leadership?
Well, honestly, when I first started speaking, my actual message was vision. Okay. It really was about helping young people identify their vision, or some say their purpose, and what they were destined in life. From there, I evolved into being a speaker, and I often share this story that I realized in the college market that if I promoted myself as a person that talks about vision, I wasn't going to be very successful as a speaker. And so at that moment, one of the words that I was hearing, or buzzwords, was leadership. It really captured my attention. I had always been a leader ever since I was in high school, never really studied leadership, but was just really drawn to this concept of leadership. And so from there, I said, I want to start talking about leadership. I have experience. At the time, I was getting my master's degree in organizational leadership. And so I felt like it was just a great connection for me, because I was able to create my passion, my study, and really what I love to do. And so it was out of that this message of leadership began to evolve. And I realized I can always include vision, because if you're going to be an effective leader, you've got to have a vision. So I could always talk about that. But at the forefront, I was drawn to this concept of leadership. And I've just grown, I've just learned, still learning when it comes to leadership. And that's really how everything evolved.
That's interesting, how people, pick up a particular focus. And, like you said, yours is leadership, and you moved in that direction. I've also heard you talk about, millennials, because you speak at, colleges and universities, maybe sometimes, high school may be a little younger for millennials, but I definitely know you go to colleges and you talk to millennials all the time. What kind of impact do you feel that you're having as you are speaking to these millennials, helping them to, become leaders, become more effective in what they do? So talk about your focus on dealing with millennials.
Yeah, I've always been drawn to generation. So
Okay.
I've been studying generation since I was in college. At that time, it was baby boomers, silent generation, Generation X, and then millennials. As it evolved, you've heard more about millennials and you've heard now about Gen Z.
Okay.
So I think that in reaching millennials, that's always been my audience as far as speaking is concerned. Even when I was talking on the college campus, or even when I was doing children's church, I was always talking to that 10-year-old, that 12-year-old. So I've always found that millennial generation has really been my lane as far as empowering, inspiring, and really just making a difference. And I felt like, definitely had a lot of success stories. I mean, we've saw countless experiences where students have been impacted, where they've been transformed. And so I feel as a speaker, I've always been really effective at reaching millennial generation. And I think it's just by being a millennial myself. Now, some say I'm Generation X, but I go by 1977, 94. So on the beginning cusp, I think just growing up with that generation and being around that generation has given me intuitive insight as it relates to reaching that generation. There's definitely some common differences with the latter part of millennial generation versus the older part of millennial generation. But again, this is a generation that wants to make an impact in the world. This is a generation that wants to leave a mark. This is a generation that desires to really do things that are making a difference in the world. And so as being a speaker that is big on inspiration, empowerment, and helping people to make an impact in the world, I felt like it was an easy connection with the millennial generation.
You said millennials, and then you also said Gen Z, and you might even said Gen X. So those are different generations. Do you have to have a message different for each generation?
No, I think messages can relate to all audiences. I just think in certain situations, your approach and your methodology has to change. And I shared this earlier today on our conversation on Clubhouse, and I talked about the evolution of speaking. I talked about how with Gen X, it was more of what I call a lecture style. Millennials, more of a PowerPoint, more visual, more digital. And now with Gen Z, it's more of what I call a kinesthetic learner. So I'm really creating activities, experiences, answering more questions. So I found that to begin to evolve with generations. And as a speaker, it's just really important to be aware of that and really to make the adjustment. And quite frankly, I found that even those from the seasoned generations actually embrace that as well. I found, PowerPoint visuals, being involved. I mean, that's just part of just learning styles in general. I just saw more of an emphasis with different generations, but I think all people like to experience that as well.
Can you give us an example of whether somebody that's a millennial or Gen X, because you were talking about having impact. Is there a story or something that you can kind of pull out just to say, well, I was dealing with this young person or this millennial, this Gen X, and we did something that really impacted their lives? Is there a story that you can share?
Yeah, there's a lot of things, but I guess this story comes up. Several years ago, I was speaking to a group of professionals about how to be effective at leading the millennial generation. And one of the things that I talk about is the servant leadership model. I shared with them that when you are leading a member of the millennial generation, this whole sink or swim mentality is very ineffective. They're much more collaborative. They're much more inclined to feedback, much more inclined to you integrating what I call a coaching style. So when I'm leading this generation, it's being available, it's building relationship, it's being collaborative, it's talking to them, it's walking them through the process. It's more of a hands-on community, whereas the Gen X are more of what they call the latchkey kids, right? We grew up by television, we were home all by ourselves, more
Absolutely.
isolated, more different. So when that comes into the workplace, again, I don't want to put people into a category, but I do want to say how you were raised and your values definitely comes into the workplace. And so when you deal with this Gen X, I was explaining how it's more of a sink or swim mentality. We're going to throw you out there and you're going to do the job. Either you're going to sink or you're going to swim. Now, this particular individual had a son that was part of the millennial generation. And literally after my presentation, I began to share this difference. He came up to me and he started bawling in tears. And he was bawling in tears because he said, for all my life, I said, why can't I lead my son? And I've realized I have used what I wanted people to do with me, which is a sink or swim mentality, when this generation is more collaborative. They want more feedback. They want more relationship building. And I wasn't incorporating that. Therefore, I was failing. And if I understood that, he said, I probably would have been much more effective with my son.
Man, you just said something that gave me flashback, whiplash. You talked about a latchkey kid.
Yeah.
Be, being 61 years old, I know about being a latchkey kid. Your parents left you almost to fend for yourself, really, from the beginning of the day. You go to school, you come home on your own. You had to have a key. That's why the term latchkey comes from. You made your own meals after school. You did your own homework after school. And then maybe about 7 o'clock, here come your parents home. But that was the way the world was, many, many years ago.
Yeah.
But you also are dealing with something, and I want to bring this up: diversity and inclusion. And you find that to be very, very important, especially from a leadership perspective. Talk about diversity and inclusion for a minute.
Yeah, so this is an evolution topic. We started with diversity, we moved into inclusion, then we moved into belonging, and now we're dealing with equity. And so when you look at the history of this concept, it's really an evolution. I think that you need all of them in order to really see the impact of diversity and inclusion work. And so I've grown up as a multicultural. My father is white, my mother is African-American. My father got remarried and now his wife is Vietnamese. My wife is Colombian. So when it comes to multicultural, I'm very aware of that. Been learning about diversity ever since I was 19 years of age. I was in college and I had the opportunity to be taught by Dr. Melania Karenga. Many of you know the creator of Kwanzaa. So anytime you have him as a professor from one of your classes, you're going to learn a lot about multicultural diversity and a variety of other things. From there, was part of Monster DLP. So I've grown in this area, I've evolved, and I've seen the evolution. And I absolutely believe that it makes a huge difference. As a matter of fact, I often tell people, you cannot engage people, you will not retain people, and you definitely won't get the most out of them as a leader if you don't have what I call cultural intelligence. And when I deal with this concept, it's a really simple term. It means, number one, I appreciate and value those that are different than me. I'm a curious learner. I'm an active listener. I develop deeper understanding through questions, and then ultimately I'm willing to adapt or make adjustments in order to be effective at creating positive cross-cultural relationships with people that are different from me. And I think that's so incredibly important because it affects our decisions. It affects how we lead. It affects how we treat people. It affects the organizational culture that we create. I mean, there's so much that is impacted by our awareness when it comes to diversity, inclusion, equity, and belonging, that is absolutely incredible. And so I'm a strong believer that it's incredibly important for all leaders or people in general really to educate them in this area. And a big thing going around right now is critical race theory. And it's always interesting to me when I see people get on there and say, oh, this is not true, this is fake. And I sit there and I'm just like, yo, you have the wrong definition. Because a lot of times what they believe it is absolutely not what it really is.
That's totally different.
And so it's really taught me the lack of ignorance out there, right? So if I don't have the right person teaching me, I can be way off from what it is. And that's a really eyes-on view of how deceptive we can be drawn away from things that's actually a fact and actually is going to make people better and make our society better as well. And so I just think that's always important. It's a really important topic, but also having the right mindset and being taught the right way is extremely important as well.
You said that people have to learn how to respect differences. Oftentimes when you're dealing with race, and you brought up critical race theory and how much is being debated and challenged, and many do have the misconception of it. One thing that I've heard often, where there are some, primarily Caucasians, will use this term, I don't see color. I just treat everybody the same and I don't see color. What do you think about those thoughts when people say, I don't see color.
Yes, absolutely false. And you know, there's actually people that believe that. It's, you know, it's really interesting. I was actually, well, so there was an article that they wrote in Times Magazine several years ago. Again, why we have to look at sources and samplings, as well as the lens in which generational research is being created. That's a whole nother conversation,
Right.
because there was an article and they said that millennials are the colorblind generation.
Yeah.
Now, I'm on a college campus. I'm talking to these guys. I was like, y'all are absolutely incorrect. But it's interesting to me that this type of information would be spewed in a national magazine. And there was actually even a millennial speaker. I mean, this guy is considered the top person when it comes. Companies are bringing him in, paying him thousands of dollars when it comes to millennials. And he was on stage at a particular conference and said, yeah, millennials are colorblind, lost the entire higher education audience. Like, who is this guy? And again, I'm not even going to fault him, but what I am going to say is when you are looking at things with the wrong lens, when you're looking at it from more of a dominant culture lens, but not a culturally diverse or competence lens, it can even skew your presentations and it can skew even your decision making. And so that's one of the reasons why I think it's just so important that we understand, number one, the millennial generation is not colorblind. Number two, when I was doing a session or a program on diversity and inclusion, and a millennial, a literal African-American millennial was like, oh, we're colorblind. I said, no, you're not.
No, you're not.
I said, you can say whatever you want. If a black man or black woman walks that door, you see their color very, very well. Don't tell me I don't see. No, you see their color. We all see color. You're lying, and maybe you're not going to preconceive certain notions, but I promise you there are other people that are going to have preconceived notions about certain people because of the color of their skin. And so I mean, I think that's very false. It's not. I don't even. Yeah.
But they say it all the time. I said to somebody once when they says, well, I don't see color, and you're right, colorblind is what they say. I says, if something happened and the police ask you to describe the person that, you know, committed the crime more or less, how do you describe them without what? Identifying
their color.
Their color. You can't, because it's an incomplete description of a person to overlook that. And I understand what you want to believe. You want to believe that in your heart, you treat everybody the same. You don't preference everybody. That's what you want to believe. But the truth is, you do see color, and I would respect you more if you said, I see your color, but I have respect for you.
Right. And I want to say this. I really actually, and I don't know if I actually want to get away from a conversation about color, because I don't know if the color of our skin is really the conversation. The real conversation is white supremacy, to think that you're better than other people based on the color of your skin. That's the real conversation, because I think that's the real challenge, is when people have this conception that based on the color of your skin, I'm better than you. And I think that is, you know, for lack of a better word, demonic. And I just think that that's what we really need to eradicate, is the thinking of not just that thought. There's more thoughts than that, of one race or one group of people being more dominant than the other race. That to me is the more important conversation from my perspective.
And how have you, I guess, managed that? Because you did say that your father is white. How have you managed that? And did you have challenges with that kind of, you know, from your upbringing and the fact that your dad was white? How did, you know, Joshua manage that?
Yeah, they used to call my dad the Black father. It's kind of funny because my dad was always into a lot of Black culture. So it was interesting. But I will say this. I have found that with biracial kids, normally they veer towards one culture more than the other. So either they'll be more towards, let's say, a Latin culture, or more towards a Black culture. So mostly kids veer towards another one. So I think I've always veered more towards my Black culture per se. So it really was never a problem for me. I really never had an issue with it. Honestly, to be really honest with you, most people just felt I was Black. More so I dealt with the challenges of being a Black man, definitely more than being a white male, to be honest with you. That was, for me, that's what I faced the most. And so that's where everything really transpired in my life. And so I often say it wasn't really an issue for me. I wasn't in this, this thing, oh my gosh, am I white, am I Black? I mean, I was just a person, and
Right.
It's great. I actually like being biracial because it gives you different perspectives. And also
Absolutely.
you're able to see actually a certain thought process from each culture that are actually very negative. So yeah, it's definitely hasn't been a problem for me.
Absolutely. And I find that we have, as you said, a greater appreciation for your own ethnic diversity, because
Right.
you know this one, you know that side. And usually where racism discrimination really comes in, when you have lack of exposure to other races of people. That's where the
Right.
problem is.
Right. That's the problem. Yep.
That's
Exposure.
what it's exposure. But
Mhm.
let me just shift the conversation, because again, we talked about you being a leader.
Yeah.
And just a couple more questions. I just want to talk about your book a little bit. It's called Red Leadership: 15 Ways
Yeah.
to Retain, Engage, and Develop More Culturally Diverse Leaders. And I know this was birthed out of your own doctoral research. So talk about this book just a little bit.
Yeah, so ultimately, Red Leadership is a really simple book. It's really to provide a resource to those that are being challenged or have a desire to develop more culturally diverse leaders of the emerging generation. And so, one of the things that I discovered, number one, is retention. Retention is a really huge problem. And I think, people are experiencing and people are facing it all across the country. And so, through my research, I was able to identify some strategies as it relates to retention, how to retain people in your organization, specifically culturally diverse. From there, we move on to engagement. And I often say in my presentation, it's one thing to engage people, but it's another thing to engage the culturally diverse individuals within your organization. And one of the huge problems with engagement is just really not leading with the right lens. So if I can educate you on issues around diversity and inclusion, cultural competence, cultural intelligence, that's going to help you to become more effective as it relates to engagement. And so I really talk about some ways in which people can grow in that area. And the last one is developing leaders. And this is really dear to my heart because obviously I deal with leadership, but really how do we set up systems to develop leaders? And that really is really extensive because it's not, to be honest with you, although I'm a leadership speaker and although I do leadership training, it's not enough just to do training as far as leadership development. I think you have to consider your succession planning. I think you have to consider, are you adding a coaching dynamic? Are you adding an experience dynamic? Are you giving them access? One of the things that I was sharing earlier today is, I've been traveling on college campuses for multiple years. Yet have I seen many campuses bring in a speaker to talk to students about succession planning. And I
Wow.
think that's so incredibly important because if you're moving from your organization is bringing in new leaders every single year, or you're bringing in student governments, if you don't have effective succession planning, it can affect the organization. Another area I think is we're dealing with the church. I think a lot of times in the church, a lack of succession planning is really affecting legacy, is really affecting ministries. And quite frankly, in certain situations, you have the wrong person in the pastoral position that probably should have never been there, but was there based on nepotism and who I like, but not based on actual planning. Are they prepared for the actual job? So I just think it's really important when it comes to leadership development and establishing these programs so we can really put the next generation of leaders in a position to win. It takes a lot of work, but definitely it's a helpful book in order to begin to implement what you can as it relates to your organization or your company.
Dr. Josh, I want to thank you for taking the time to come on the show. I know you're a busy guy, and I just appreciate you for taking some time out to be on the show. But before you go, tell us where we can get the book, and tell us your social media information so people who want to contact you, they can reach you.
Yeah, no, I appreciate it. Thank you. Thank you for having me, Dr. Walker. As it relates to the book, you can go to redleadershipbook.com. Really simple. The book will come up. Also on Amazon, you can purchase the book on Amazon. I often tell people if you want a signed copy, order from my website, redleadershipbook.com. If you just want a copy of the book, you can get that directly from Amazon. In addition to that, I'm also on LinkedIn. I'm on Facebook, and then on Instagram at Dr. Joshua Fredenburg. And so there's a variety of ways to connect with me. And really the simplistic way to connect with me is just go to google.com and put Joshua Fredenburg and speaker, and all my information will come up.
Absolutely. Dr. Josh, again, thank you for coming on our show today. And as I say to all my guests, you have gone beyond the culture. And I thank you for joining us today.
Thank you so much, Dr. Butcher. Appreciate it.
All right, man. Thanks for being with us.
All right, thank you.
Now, if you want to continue to hear inspiring interviews like the one you heard today, I want you to subscribe to this podcast on iTunes. Also, rate the show and please leave a comment. I would also love it if you would share this podcast with your friends to let them know that we're on. Finally, please go to our website at www.beyondtheculturepodcast.com, or you can email me at beyondtheculturepodcast@gmail.com. On the website, you can subscribe to the show and connect with me by leaving your email address. I'd love to hear from you. This is your host, Dr. David Walker, and we'll talk again on Beyond the Culture. Take care.